Good morning, Dr. Gomes, and thank you for being a guest.
Morning.
Um, you are a recurring guest, which is wonderful. And this topic today is going to be about stress and cortisol, part one of maybe a part four series with regards to mental burnout, how you basically, as an ER doctor, a DO, and in your integrative medicine practice of over a 30-year run plus, perhaps even where you started in the ER, where you experienced personally your levels
Mhm.
of stress and health concerns that led you to even the paleo diet and how that affected everything that was going on with you physically. So I'm going to let you start with that.
Sure. And thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure. Um, so stress is something that affects everyone and affects everyone to different degrees. And many stressors often even go unrecognized by the individual. Um, Modern day life is stressful. And when we compare what it's like to live a life in our current existing world compared to what our even our parents or our great grandparents lived in, where they had acute stressors, event stressors that were clearly visible, someone dying, someone developing an illness, someone sustaining an injury, a house burning down, war, and a loved one being off to war with World War II and Vietnam, where you know a, a, a parent, a sibling, a child, a spouse being off to war and not knowing if they were going to come back and always waiting for that letter in the mail or that notification. Those are obvious stressors. No one doesn't not recognize those and sees those as being stressors.
Mm.
But let's fast forward to modern world and the world we now exist in, where the workday starts from the moment someone wakes up. And often it's already
With my coffee
checking,
cup.
yes, often
Cheers.
often cheers, often starting with checking text messages, checking for any direct messages for those that may use, Facebook or Instagram for any kind of business purposes, checking emails, like before the day even gets started, already on a phone or a tablet, checking things, already working. Then it is for those that have children, it is getting them up. It is getting them ready. It may be getting them off to school. It may be driving them to school. And that's a pressure. That can be a stressor. That is so mundane, so routine. We neglect it. We think nothing of it. Then for those that work outside of the home and actually have to go to a physical place like a hospital or an office or whatever, there is the traffic involved. There are lights, there's time crunches, there's an accident on the road, they're going to be late to work, all these different things that are taking place. And while driving there may be stressors like text messages already coming across, or phone calls already coming across, or things that need to be done. All of this multitasking that is continually taking place from the moment the alarm clock goes off. Then there's the work environment itself, all the moving parts of that, relationships, interactions, the employer or the employees for those that may be, the ones at the top, and having to deal with all the moving parts of whatever business, whatever it may be, and the workload of which there's always an enormous amount of work to be done that could never be done in one day, but there's this pressure that people put on themselves, and I see this a lot in the patients that I see in the office, the pressure that somehow they need to get everything done today. And then there's almost this disappointment when they don't get it done, but yet it will be there tomorrow. And it doesn't need to be completed today or tomorrow or next week, but it's there on the list. And so therefore there's this pressure to get it done. So much so that some then, when they leave work, don't actually clock out and go home and leave it for tomorrow. They get on their email, they continue to respond to text messages, they continue to do work after they've already clocked out and gone home. And then there's the possibly preparing a meal at home or having to rush through a drive-through or takeout, to take food home to feed the family. There is the potential, possibly having to drive kid one to this event and kid two to that event, and being all over the place. And never during any of this part of the day is there anything that's been overwhelmingly stressful. It's just constant stress
Mhm.
on the psychology, on the psyche, the mind of our brains that is always weighing on us. We always have to be doing something. We always have to be thinking. We always have to be processing. We always have to be focused on everything going on rather than ever just sitting, breathing, taking a moment, relaxing. And so we're always in sympathetic overdrive. And this will often continue right through until the time we go to bed. And it may involve, some people may close out the evening with watching the news, often a bad idea,
Mhm.
because when is there ever really good news on the news, right? You get to hear about tragedies and travesties all around the world or around the country. Well, that's exciting. That's a nice, relaxing thing to go to bed with.
Great.
Or, hey, let's watch a scary movie, right? Or a drama, like a crime drama, or like FBI type series. Oh, let's watch something about rapists or serial killers, something like that. And it's like your mind is taking all this and does not really differentiate. That's fake. This is reality.
Mm.
So, when you're watching a show, when you're watching a movie, when you're watching the news and your heart rate goes up, or if you were monitoring your blood pressure and your blood pressure goes up, or it's like you're physiologically responding to what you're watching on the news, or you're watching in a show or a movie. Your mind is there. You are experiencing this. You are engaged in this. This is what you're going to sleep with. This is what you're taking to bed with you. So, and then there are some who will then check their email, check their text messages and everything before they go to bed. And then may have difficulty falling asleep or the almost prototypical adrenal axis dysfunction of being up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and unable to get back to sleep. And
Mhm.
now up for an hour or two before finally falling back to sleep and then having to be up in 2 to 3 hours, to actually get the day started and repeat. And it's a repeat cycle day in and day out. And it's not the 1 day or 2 day occasionally that actually creates the adrenal axis dysfunction that leads to what used to be referred to as adrenal fatigue. It is the pattern, and the body likes patterns. It establishes patterns and it becomes very accustomed to it. So when you're chronically in this 5 day a week, 6 day a week cycle of being in this high stress, constant go, go, go environment, that's what your body becomes adapted to and expects. And it doesn't matter that it's not the right environment for your body. Your physiology is adapting to what it needs to do to keep you alive, to keep you surviving. So a common thing that I see and I communicate with my patients in the office is so, when you go on vacation and you go away for a week and you get there on that first day, how do you feel? No one feels great on day one. It's a travel day. You're unpacking. You're getting used to the Airbnb or the hotel room or whatever. You're not settled. You're actually very unsettled. You're still tense. You're now day two of vacation. You're starting to feel a little better. You start to really feel the change, but not quite yet. And you might still be thinking about the office. You might still be thinking about what's going on. Am I missing something? What am I going to have to catch up on when I get back? You get to day three, four, five, you're a totally different person. And you start to feel the tension decline. You're now comfortable laying on the beach and listening to the ocean and the seagulls. You're comfortable sitting in an Adirondack in the mountains and just, feeling the breeze and looking at the endless sky. You're now in a good place. But now you get to day seven, and now it's the travel day back. Well, now the tension starts building back up. And then the next day you're back at work, and it's like a rubber band snapping back into action. It's like you never went on vacation. You're right back to the pattern your body always recognized. The part that's abnormal for the individual is the vacation, because the normal for that individual is this go, go, go high stress environment.
Mhm.
That's the adaptation. That's what leads to the adrenal axis dysregulation and dysfunction. that ultimately leads to what we call burnout. So, burnout is, in common terms, what in a clinical environment of functional medicine or integrative medicine is referred to as adrenal axis dysregulation or dysfunction, either adaptive high cortisols or non-adaptive low cortisols when your cortisol should be high. You know, this is a common description I use, with the people in my office, which is what is the adaptive response, which is, by the way, an appropriate response, but just says, yeah, you're under a lot of stress. So we measure salivary cortisol. The cortisol is above the reference range. It's like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be producing cortisol. That's good, right? Yeah, well, yes, but what does it tell me about what was happening in that moment on that day, that your cortisol is that high?
Mhm.
And then again, if that's a 1 day out of a blue moon, so what? Right? That's the acute stressors. That is the getting the bad news. That is the house burnt down. That is, you just got a horrible diagnosis. That that's the acute stress event. You're supposed to have a robust cortisol response. But what if that's the same pattern day in and day out, over and over for weeks, months, years? That's the problem because you're constantly in a sympathetic overdrive that is disrupting blood sugar levels, disrupting insulin sensitivity, disrupting hormonal pathways, disrupting the gut microbiome, contributing to leaky gut, contributing to all of these things that ultimately lead to diseases like high blood pressure and obesity and diabetes and even cardiovascular disease, stroke, and conditions far down the road of like dementia. So that's the physical connection to the psychological dysregulation. So, yes, it's an adaptive response, but that adaptive response would be like, okay, I'm walking in the woods, I'm on a trail, and I encounter a black bear. And it's one of those oh moments, right? The adaptive response is fight or flight. I either am going to end up grappling with this thing and trying my best to actually like kill it or fight it. It better be a very, very, very tiny black bear. Or the more logical response is I'm going to turn and hightail it out and I'm going to run and hopefully get away from this thing and survive, right? So fight or flight, life and death. That's the adaptive cortisol response. That's what it's all about. So that your hair standing on end, the heart rate going up, the blood pressure going up, the pupils becoming dilated, the hands getting clammy, like these are all protective mechanisms designed to allow us to either engage in a battle or to run like hell. That's when it's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen when you're driving to work in your car. It's not supposed to happen when you're on a phone call. It's not supposed to happen when you are simply interacting with your children and disagreeing over something. It's not supposed to happen with an alarm clock going off in the morning. Like, that's not when you're supposed to be in fight or flight. We're not supposed to experience that all day, every day, all the time. The opposite of that, which is the loss of adaptive response, is you encounter that bear in the woods. It's like, this is how it ends. And you just sit there and you just wait to see how it plays out because you don't have the adrenal response to be able to mount an adequate fight or flight. So you don't have the energy to sprint and run or climb or to fight because it's not there. These are the people who experience extreme fatigue. They are more prone toward multiple illnesses because of the lack of an appropriate adrenal response. They become severely depleted with even light activities, and this contributes to all the chronic metabolic types of conditions as well. That's advanced adrenal axis dysfunction from months, years of that pattern that leads to depletion, overwhelming stress on this pathway that leads to essentially a down regulation of the pathway. So a depleted response is what happens. That's the burnout. It's not the I feel so stressed, I feel tense, and I'm wearing my shoulders as earrings.
It's like,
We know, yes, this is stressful to me. No, it is the burnout is that phase three adrenal axis dysfunction. It is that depleted state. You're in a depressive state. You're in a fatigue. You have no energy to do anything. You have no desire to do anything. You you don't even look forward to going to work. You're thinking, I have to find something else to do. I have to pick something different. Life is not going the way that I would like it to. For me personally, and my own personal story with that, I probably went through burnout in emergency medicine half a dozen times. Each one got a little bit longer. And my first one was probably in the first year and a half, 2 years of starting after graduating residency. Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, fresh, ready to go, still younger. Um, shouldn't have had any issues with that whatsoever. But I was a night shift doctor, circadian rhythm disruption. So, 14, 15 days out of the month, I was working overnights, which means that the other 15 days of the month, I was constantly recovering from working overnights. So, total circadian rhythm disruption, very stressful. Bad diet to go along with that. So, relying on convenience foods, eating quick items, quick because of hectic, stressful, go, go, go life associated with that. Add to that, I was at a level two trauma center, high acuity, um, and high volume facility. And at the time, working with a few docs that when if there were certain people that were overlapping with me until that midnight 1 a.m. time frame, that would phase out 2 to 3 hours before their shift was over. That means everybody coming in is mine. And so it was work overload. So at the time, I was averaging, and this may not mean much to anyone who's not familiar with with the clinical realm of emergency medicine. I was averaging in a high acuity facility, level two trauma center, 3.3 patients per hour. That's high volume. The American College of Emergency Physicians has basically put out that the average that an emergency physician should be seeing in an environment like that is 1.8. To put that in context. So, very high stress environment with an extensive workload with circadian disruption. And that led to the sense of I would drive to work. I lived in a beautiful region of Maryland. I loved where I lived. Lots of beautiful outdoor resources, lakes and streams and trails and all that. And I didn't even enjoy doing that anymore. And this went on for a couple of months. And I would drive to work, be pulling into the parking lot, and my energy would just start to plummet.
Mm.
And I could feel this wave of ugh. And then I would look at the number of ambulances already parked in the ambulance bay, and it would be like the heart would just drop to the floor. It's like, here we go again. And then walk in and see who I was working with that was supposed to be seeing people with me for the next few hours and thinking, great, this is all me for the next 10 hours. And
Mm.
so all of that was just a total depleted state where I did not like my job, felt like a very negative feeling toward my career choice, did not enjoy going to work. Eventually, it lifted. So the burnout, the adrenal fatigue lifted. It required some looking inward, spending some time out in nature, sort of resetting, the mental framework and saying, why do I do what I do? Why am I where I am? And what choices do I really have? So mental reframing that basically got me back to like, okay, this is my job. This is what I do. This is what I'm trained for. Just do it. All right. But ultimately leads to making future decisions. Am I going to stay in this job? Am I going to continue with where I am or what I'm doing? So that leads to decisions.
Mm.
That's the adaptive response. Well, that led to me requesting to have a transfer from the hospital I was at in Western Maryland to the city hospital in Baltimore because I at the time I worked for the University of Maryland medical system, and so I just requested to be transitioned to a different part of basically the same system. Fresh place, new environment, new faces, totally different work environment, not a level two trauma center, not as high acuity, fresh start, always exciting, always happy, right? But then things happen, and felt more administratively, having nothing to do with the work environment itself, but directorship, the people at the administrative level became a little bit of a stressor for me because they didn't agree with my request and decision to transition because it didn't I was no longer where they wanted me to be. And some strings were pulled to get me there. So that upset them. And then I did not feel comfortable being there anymore because I felt like my career there was always going to be hindered and suppressed. So I made a decision to move back to New Jersey, which actually turned out to be a very good decision for me because of family circumstances that happened over the following, 2 years. But new job, new environment, always exciting until you realize, oh my God, this is like a repeat of my first job. Certain people not carrying their weight. Uh, you know, all kinds of things that go along with that that ultimately led to burnout number two and a decision to, okay, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna switch again, still a night doc, so still circadian rhythm disruption to go along with that, and still not eating a great diet with regard to foods that were negatively affecting me. So I changed positions again and actually went to another hospital, very high volume, but good pay, closer to home, and I shifted off of nights and went to day shift, at least to start, and felt totally different. And it was a revival. It was feeling refreshed and again the newness, the change, different environment, different people, always exciting. And then it kind of started to get a little bit impacting as well. So then it became a financial stressor. There was a big, financial hit due to reimbursement from insurance companies, Medicare and Medicaid specifically, that led to cuts in our reimbursement. And so the place that was actually paying very well now wasn't paying all that well at all. And actually took a pay cut compared to where it was before. And in living in New Jersey, which by the way says a lot because pay cuts in New Jersey don't play well because there's still the taxes, there's still costs for everything. It's an insanely expensive place to live, and high stress environment of just extreme traffic and overpopulation and all that. So again, it was this thing where okay, burnout number three, burnout number four, but always just a few weeks of just like needing to refocus, reestablish sort of a new baseline. And then my worst burnout that I experienced was several years ago, already in North Carolina. And this went on for probably about 3 months. And this led to me actually making the decision of wanting to get out of emergency medicine altogether. Um, and I wasn't, and I was already doing functional medicine. I already had a practice, but it was a little bit disjointed because I was still full-time emergency medicine while growing my functional medicine practice. And so but it was at the point where I felt like I could not continue on in emergency medicine because the environment was so stressful. The place was under construction. The volumes were extremely high. The wait times in our waiting room had gone from 30 minutes, 45 minutes to 6 to 8 hours.
Oh,
And this was translating with patient complaints, walking into a room to see someone saying, "Hi, I'm Dr. Gomes. I'm here to see you." Well, it's about time you come in. Like, and just like all the negativity being put on us, even though this was an administrative problem, this was a hospital problem, not an ER group problem or my problem, but yet we absorbed it. And every time I would look at the screen and see the waiting room now with 25 people, 30 people, 35 people, it's like that was stressful to me to where I actually applied for a position with a functional lab company for a position that they had posted that would get me out of clinical medicine. And that meant closing both my functional medicine practice and leaving the ER. And I was at the point where that is what I want to do. And it was going to involve a pay cut and it was going to involve a total change in my role. And yet it was something I was willing to do because of how bad this had gotten for me and just not seeing a way out of this. And this involved finally because it was a multi-month process of going through that of the interview process and then waiting and waiting for a decision to be made. It was a literal climb on the mountain and go into nature and having a conversation one-sided conversation with God about what the hell am I supposed to do here? What is my path forward? I don't understand. I'm waiting on an answer from this here, on what I'm going to be doing. Have not been happy in doing this over here, and you know, and it's an interesting, almost transcendental experience that when I came off the mountain, I had an answer.
Mm.
And it's actually literally that's how I felt. I got in my car and I started driving away from the Blue Ridge, and I decided I wanted to stay in emergency medicine. And if they had offered me the position at the lab, my plan was to decline it because I came to the realization emergency medicine is where I was supposed to be. That's where I was going to close out my career in medicine. And what I had come up with was don't stress over what's not mine to stress over. I can't control the waiting room. Block out that part of the screen. I can't control the lab, radiology, things that go on upstairs in the hospital, not within my realm of control. I had to let that go. I'm going to focus on patient care. I'm going to focus on chart hits the rack, person's ready to be seen, go see them. Do the best I can for my patient, to be an advocate for my patient. And for those that I can see, I can't do anything about the waiting room. That's a hospital problem. That's not a me problem. It's not because of me that they're in the waiting room. It's not because I'm sitting around sipping coffee and reading a newspaper while there's people waiting to be seen, which, by the way, is one of the things I was dealing with in Western Maryland, where certain docs actually took 1 hour, hour and a half lunch breaks while there was people waiting to be seen. And they would actually physically open up a newspaper, reading and drinking their coffee, and I would be the only one actually seeing patients for that 60 to 90 minutes, and which is not how emergency medicine is supposed to be practiced, by the way. So it was that realization that allowed me to finish out my career in emergency medicine on my terms. I eventually reopened my functional medicine practice about 9 months later, but with reorganization. So I had now changed it where I took better control over the scheduling of, in emergency medicine, to where I could say, okay, these are days that I'm off, and those are going to be my functional medicine days. So I had dedicated days that I would not work in the ER that were built into my scheduling in the ER that allowed me to now schedule people out weeks or months in advance and created better structure, which was a big stressor for me before, because it was always like, okay, I need to see what my ER schedule looks like before I can schedule you for a follow-up. So there was just a lot of turmoil, a lot of stress that was all kind of sort of out of my control,
Mhm.
but yet I owned it. And so the stress reduction, the stress management part is the planning, it's the strategizing, it's having a plan of how to change the environment, what to do. And one thing that's very hard for people to do is letting go of things that are actually out of their control and
Mhm.
simply saying, you know what? I can't do anything about this. I can't change it. There is a supervisor, there is a manager, there is an administrator, there is a CEO that pulls the strings and controls my environment. I can't do anything about that, so I can't own it. Come to work, do my job, go home, get paid. And I communicate this a lot with my patients as well. When it comes to the work environment, why are you there? Would you be there? And would you still go there and do your job if you were not being paid and compensated? If the answer is no, then you're there for a purpose, which is to make money. And you can love your job, you can be okay with your job, you can be really good at it, you could even be passionate about it. But if there was no income to come with it, would you actually go and do it? And if the answer is no, and the environment is so toxic, so stressful, so disruptive to you that it's affecting your relationships, it's affecting your sleep, it's depleting your energy, and it's leaving you completely in an existence of poor quality of life, you need to consider either how to change the work environment, how you respond to that work environment. Like, that's not my role. I'm not going to do everybody else's job for them. or it's not my job to worry about how everything is operating. My job is to do A, B, or C. That's what I get paid to do. That's what I'm going to do. So it's either a mindset shift or it is a, you know what, I need to find another job. I need to get out of here. And then begins the search for what you can do differently or where you can go that provides you a different work environment. Those are the answers on how to deal with it, not just simply suck it up and just keep doing it because this is what you signed up for.
Great.
So the real stress is that. And we are not designed for multitasking. The human mind is, while there are people who do it better than others, the human mind is not designed for multitasking. We are not designed to be go, go, go all day long, all the time. And we need to take moments where we just simply disconnect, where we just simply be. And that could be sitting in the morning, getting some, sunrise sunshine, drinking a cup of coffee or tea or bone broth or whatever, listening to nature, taking in the sun rays, feeling a breeze, and just being before getting into the work environment. Because yes, we have to exist in this modern world. We have to live in this modern world, and we have to do the things that need to be done because of this modern world.
Mhm.
Something that our ancestors, again, did not have because we now have nuclear families, no grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins living within 200 feet, of us. So they're your kids, you raise them. You take them everywhere. You feed them. You have to deal with every question, every issue, everything needs to be done between one or two parents. It's no longer a village
Mhm.
because the grandparents or the aunts and uncles may be across the country. They may be on another end of the state. And so they're not easily accessible. There's no easy way to have a date night. There's no easy way to just take a breather and just sit back and relax because the kids are with another loved one that's watching them while you get a chance to take a bath or simply sit and relax and read a book or do something that is easing to your mind and to your psyche. We have environments now that expect you to literally work 24/7.
Mhm.
Employers that have expectations that you're going to work when you go home, that you're going to get everything done. You're going to reach the end of the internet today, right? Like, no, that's not a realistic expectation. Our ancestors, our parents, grandparents, great grandparents, you clocked in, you clocked out. The
Mhm.
whistle blew for the start of the day, the whistle blew for the end of the day. You went home, you know what you weren't doing? Thinking about work. There was no internet. There were no emails. There was no text messaging. There was no social media. None of that existed.
Mhm.
So what did you do when you got home? Spent time with your family, made a meal,
Mhm.
maybe relaxed on the back porch or listened to the radio, to some story on the radio or whatever, right? That is what life was. And then you went to bed at a reasonable hour. You woke up when you had to wake up and you went through the day. And you may not have loved your job. You may not have always been in a happy place, but you didn't have the other 1,000 stressors compounding that every single day.
Mhm.
This is the pattern modern humans live in that contributes to so many conditions that all get attributed to heredity, genetics, salty food, whatever, right? And yet, stress is the probably the biggest elephant sitting in the room that is so disruptive to how these individuals are functioning. And yes, compounded by maybe an inflammatory diet or sedentary behavior or toxin exposures and all that, compounded by, but yet it's the singular most important factor that they may need to address, and it's so hard to do.
I really like that you wrapped with patterns, the human condition, the behavioral patterns. Like as a human, we are conditioned to adapt to certain situations, adaptive stressors that we've created. We create these patterns, we adapt to them as the human condition, and then it's almost going into reverse, as our
Hmm.
ancestors did, though it takes time, work, dedication. So this leads us into part two, which is
Hmm.
where I appreciate that you did focus on the mental burnout and especially in the work environment, but also with all the other factors that people have, as parents or caring for elderly, the work, trying to fit in a walk, an exercise at 4:45 before the day starts while everyone's sleeping,
Hmm.
and of course, waking up with whatever stimulant suits your desire. So
Yeah.
part two, there's various other conversations and topics we've discussed, health span versus lifespan and toxic environments. But I certainly welcome the continuation of adaptive stress and those behavioral patterns that we continue to not adjust and change so that we can get
Yeah.
back to a little bit of a baseline. That
Yes.
so thank you again, Dr.
Yeah.
Gomes.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
go ahead,
close out. If you'll allow me, I'm going
please.
to close
Of
out with
course.
an analogy that I commonly use. My rubber band. Okay. So this is its baseline, right? That's the
Mhm.
baseline. This is a totally relaxed, flaccid rubber band. How long under these conditions before it begins to fray and eventually breaks? This is a rubber band under stress, under tension. And at this level of tension, given a set amount of time, of which I don't have the answer to that, we are all genetically unique. We all have genetic aspects of how much our body can tolerate, where we are nutritionally, other factors that may be compounding the stress load. But I guarantee you, because a few weeks ago I had to replace the rubber band because it broke. And I had that one for about a year and a half using this example. So, yeah, eventually under this tension, it will fray and will break. If I expand it, it will happen sooner. If I expand it further, it will happen sooner under greater tension, under greater stress. If we change the stress environment, things change. If we stay under extreme stress conditions, eventually our ability to adapt becomes frayed and then collapses on itself. So we are incredibly adaptable. We are not a rubber band. We can heal, we can repair. If the rubber band frays, you cannot fix it. We can fix ourselves. Our human biology allows repair and regeneration. But we have only a certain level of adaptation before things start to fall apart. And that's organ dysfunction that starts to manifest the symptoms.
Mhm.
And it manifests in every organ in your body. And that's where it now is indicating that's the check engine light turning on. There is a problem developing. But yet we keep going because that's what life expects of us. That's what our employers expect of us. That's what our family expects of us. That's what our neighbors expect of us. We just keep going and we just keep doing and doing and doing because that's what we think we're supposed to do. And yet, what we need to do is shorten the rubber band. We need to implement the stress reduction techniques. We need to incorporate the disconnecting from the stressors and just give our minds and our bodies a break. That's really where the answer comes in of how to address it.
I appreciate that analogy even more so on a
Sure.
personal level because my father has worn a rubber band around his wrist, maybe for a lifetime, for as long as I know. I have no idea why. So now perhaps he was ahead of the game for most of us, where I will now follow up to find out exactly why he has that, or at least try to give him this analogy as well to carry through the rest of his 10, 15, 20 years, living their best life where
Yeah,
we're taking everything on that they didn't have back in the 1950s or then earlier on. So thank you again. Fantastic
it was my
analogy.
pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Until the next time. All right.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Appreciate
All
you. Thank
right.
you. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.